All right, I think we'll get started and people can come in as we get started. My name is Kylee Crook. I'm the Director of Education at the Bass Museum of Art in Miami Beach. And I'm the Southeastern Museum Education Representative for NAEA's Museum Ed Committee. We also have one other that I can see of, Gwendolyn Fernandez, who is the
Pacific
representative. So if you are interested, you want to get involved, we can put our emails in the chat and you can reach out to us. Also, in a couple of times throughout, I will also post a survey about the peer-to-peers and what your interests are. So if you feel so inclined, you can go ahead and fill out that survey. It's very short, and let us know what your interests are. And then right now, I'll hand it over to Mike Deetsch, who is the education director the education and learning engagement director at the Toledo Museum of Art. And he will be taking it over. I'll be helping to facilitate any questions in the chat and to just help things along, but feel free, this is an open conversation. Feel free to unmute yourself and ask questions, chime in, offer your experiences as well. We want to hear from everyone. And with that, I hand it over to you, Mike.
All right, thanks, Kylee. Thanks everybody for joining the call today. Nice to see some familiar faces. So yeah, we really do want to keep this as a discussion, and this is really about programming in general, but I think we can sort of take it wherever the conversation goes. I'm just curious, so I do have like a little presentation that I'll give just to sort of talk about Toledo's journey to get both reopened and then to start going to programming. We have been open since June 23rd, without much fanfare from our governor, who was like, very intentional about each of the openings. And then he suddenly issued a press release in mid-June and was like, oh yeah, by the way, museums can open next week. So we were sort of like scrambling at that point. So I'm sure a lot of you all are facing that as well. Just so before I jump into the PowerPoint part though, just to get the conversation started, I'm just curious, is there anybody on the call who is working for a museum that is not currently open? Okay, so it looks like everybody's open by this point. Okay, I know that there are some, particularly out in California and some other areas where things have been sort of dragging out a little bit, obviously for very good reason. Okay, so I'm just going to do this. This will be pretty fast. I just want to go through sort of TMA's journey. So for those of you that don't know, the Toledo Museum of Art, we are in Northwest Ohio. We're right on the Michigan border, about an hour south of Detroit and Ann Arbor, respectively. We are entirely private and privately funded. So I think, aside from the basic COVID regulations that are put forth by the state, we have a lot of flexibility, I would say, in sort of like what we do and how we choose to do it. So I'll walk through this a little bit. And Kylee, before you say anything, I am increase my font here so we can see this. So I presume most of you are familiar with Colleen Dillon-Schneider's Know Your Own Bone website. If you are not, I would encourage you to do it because she creates a lot of data and reports out on a lot of data related to museums and cultural entities, and has been doing a weekly post, if not bi-weekly, since the launch of COVID. But the screen capture that I pulled from her site right here is what are the things that are holding you back from visiting a museum? I'm sure we are all facing sort of downturned attendance in some way, shape, or form. But I just wanted to highlight, this was just from a week and a half ago of what Colleen Dillon Schneider pulled out. These are the top 5 reasons why people are not visiting cultural entities across the board. So again, in case you haven't seen this, coronavirus concerns, and you can see, so the blue bar is this year, the orange bar is last year. Obviously, coronavirus was not top of mind for anyone last year, right? So there was no sort of impact last year. And then we have other sort of competing activities, other non-museum related events. Also sort of relatively new and higher this year is public safety concerns, with civil unrest happening throughout the country. And then going back to more standard bearer challenges for why people are not visiting cultural entities, including difficulty getting there or have already been there, and nothing new to see. And I wanted to point these out, right, because I know that each one of us is involved, in charge of, responsible for executing events that will bring people to our institutions, or have things available for folks when they do come. But what becomes really clear to me, certainly when looking at this, right, the top concern being coronavirus, we have absolutely no control over. Right. So no matter what, right, no matter how hard we attempt to put on programs and try to get people through the door, we are dealing with a challenge that is 100% out of our control. Right. So that's important to keep in mind. I'm sure that we're already all thinking this anyway. Maybe this is important to remind, our directors or our board members that there are certain things just out of our control. No matter if we have the best program in the world or the best museum in the world, there will be reasons why people choose not to visit us, and we don't have control over that. So just a little bit about sort of the TMA side. Like many of you all, we first launched with doing virtual programming. I should say we have, or had at the time, really no expertise, equipment, background. So we found ourselves, buying iPads, buying tripods, buying lighting, picking up things here and there where we could, not necessarily as a means of, having high volumes of people participate in these things or making lots of money. We just didn't want people to lose sight of the museum, particularly, thinking that if this is a long-term struggle that we're going to be facing, and everything indicates that it is, by the time COVID is over, whatever that means or whenever that is, we didn't want our audience totally lost, right? So again, sort of this initial, and I'm sure it's very similar for most of you. And so, as I mentioned, about 3 months into the pandemic, the governor did allow museums in our state to reopen. So we formed a cross-functional task force team, which I'm sure many of you all did, where we put certain things to play, notably limited capacity, timed admission, although we are a free museum. So asking people to register in advance was a new behavior that we were asking of them. We also created a one-way flow to experience the space. This was all when we initially opened. As we have moved forward now 4 months now almost, a lot of these regulations have been lifted, primarily because we're just not seeing the attendance that I think we would want to see. And so there's not as much of a need to control volumes of visitors or timed entry in the way that we had thought we could, or needed to rather. So to provide a little bit of context here, so this is our entire campus. We're about 36 acres. Our main building right here is what we opened first. This houses the majority of our collection. And then across the street, we have a glass pavilion, which houses our glass collection, as well as our functioning glass studio. So when we first reopened, we really reopened just what is the west wing of our galleries to one-way flow, and then began to activate the outdoor part of our campus. Now, we do things outside regularly, but I wouldn't say with any sort of high volume. So this was also about staff getting used to being outside and being used to outside regularly. And I'll talk a little bit more about that, but certainly we do have the advantage, right? We have this large park-like system that we're nestled in right here, which does give us some advantage to return maybe in a way that we wouldn't have been able to had we not had outdoor property. So one of the things that we decided is in order to maybe encourage people to come back is to launch some new programs that would do just that. So the first thing that we did is we contracted a chalk artist based out of Ann Arbor. You can sort of barely make him out right here. And he spent a Saturday back in July actually drawing characters all over the sidewalks throughout our campus. So we wanted to create an event-like atmosphere, again, encouraging social distancing, mask wearing, sanitizers, sanitizing stations were close by throughout. We did not require pre-registration for this, largely because it would be sort of a fluid program throughout the day. We also started a story time program outside, particularly for the younger ones. So we have our family center and early childhood manager right here. And, you know, would see crowds between 20 and 30 individuals for this weekly program, which was nice. And it certainly sort of a change from what we would normally make available inside. So then I think as we started to roll these things out and become more comfortable, and, you know, part of the initial going back, which I'm sure many of you all felt as well, was like the initial sort of trepidation of returning, the initial trepidation of doing programs. Am I going to feel safe? Are my audience going to feel safe? What are the behaviors going to be like? And once we all became really comfortable with that, I'd say within the first week or two, we started to create new programs or adapt new programs that we were comfortable rolling out. So certainly bringing tours back was one of those things. We can talk about docents later, but certainly one of the things that became very apparent to me, I suppose early on, but I sort of held it at bay as long as I could, was how much the docents wanted to be involved or connected in some way during this time. And that was a challenge, right? Since I'm also trying to do that with staff, and then to also have to do it with a volunteer corps as well. We were fortunate we had built a mobile hot shop. So we have within our glass studio, we have a working hot shop in which we do daily demonstrations. We built a mobile one and moved it outside so we could regularly still offer those. Because one of the things that we have been trying to do is also not get people to congregate in any specific areas within the museum for any period of time, right? So we want sort of a steady flow. So being outside really helps with our ability to do that. Certainly, like many of you, music is a big component of what we do with our public programming. And here we started inviting musicians to come back during our closed days to do performances. And we've recorded those performances, and we're launching some of those online. You know, so again, sort of, we wanted to set the museum context and sort of put things in place as best we could. And then we also have a large teacher program that we host over the summertime, which is our teacher leader program. It's sort of an intensive program where we work with teachers in the summer and then periodically throughout the year. We wanted to have this online, but the teachers did not. The teachers actually wanted to come to the museum. This was mid to late July. They were ready to be out. They were ready to be away from sort of like Zoom learning and distance learning. And so we had a really successful program. Here you see some of the teachers in our glass pavilion. So we did things indoors and outdoors with this group. You know, one of our sort of immediate lessons that we put into place is if we're going to do things outside, we should always have a backup date, right, in the event of weather, or a backup plan. So meaning we can shift to Zoom or some other sort of category like that. And so I'm going to wrap this up now, but I think, you know, just some discussion thoughts or prompts that we can throw out there, right? What was your process like to get your museum reopened? How have you adapted your current programming? Have you developed new programs as a result of COVID? That to me is a really interesting question. You know, I was talking to one of my colleagues recently where I realized that we work so hard to adapt programs. It would have been much nicer had we just said, you know what, we're going to hold those for later. Let's create something new to fit this sort of new format, the new way of we're doing things. Have you had the ability or opportunity to move outside to update programs based on location? And then are your visitors actually asking for programming? I think, you know, I've heard this range across museums, right? But is it visitors that are driving the programming, or is it others in the institution that are really eager for things to get back to normal, as they say? And then finally, how are you feeling and how are your staff feeling, not only being open, but now bringing programming back, right? So just some thoughts. I am going to stop right there, pull off the presentation, and you know, certainly like everybody else, this is an ever evolving situation, right? And I wouldn't say that like we've landed on anything that's like, this is perfect, we're moving forward with this is the plan. I think like everybody else, we do things for a few weeks, then it's like, maybe let's try it this way now, or let's go in this direction. So that's enough of my initial sort of soliloquy here. I will step back and let anybody else jump in that wants to, as far as sort of your own reflections on what you heard me say, or anything else you want to add for the group.
We have a question in the chat from Abby from Contemporary Austin. How do you keep people apart when watching demos and performances together?
Yeah, that's a great question. So we have done two things. One, we actually have created decals and we put them directly on the ground, right? And we say, please stand here with all of, you know, the same things that you would see in the line for a grocery store otherwise. We have found, at least outside, and maybe because there's a lot of space, people naturally do that anyway, right? They'll come with sort of a family collective or whatever. They tend to group together and give each other space. But that was certainly one thing that we were concerned with, of like, let's just say we have 15 people show up for an outdoor tour. And what if everybody like wants to be on top of whoever's giving the tour or on top of each other? We've noticed at least the natural tendencies outside, they haven't, but once we put them inside, we try to keep them as stationary as possible by having designated spaces for them to be.
And then another question came from Christy from Asheville Art Museum. Do you normally charge for performances? And if so, are you charging for virtual? And how are virtual performances being delivered?
So we generally don't charge for music performances. On occasion we do. And we're not doing that same thing for the virtual ones. Where we have charged is, so we have a large art class program. We have 2,000 students that sign up for art classes for us every year. We have 3 semesters a year. Classes generally run 5 weeks to 10 weeks. We pivoted those online pretty early on, and it obviously a very different format, right? They were all pre-recorded. We offered art kits that went out with those. We did decide to charge for those, but we knew that they would be sort of rocky at best rolling these out. So what we elected to do is to keep the cost low, but enough that we could at least break even of those initial sunk expenses of buying the iPads, buying the tripods, buying all of the equipment that we needed to do to be able to do that. So for a program that would normally gross $300,000 a year, so roughly $100,000 a semester, I think we grossed $7,000 this summer. So, you know, again, a fraction of what we would normally do, but it was really about like, how do we stay connected with people? And we knew we didn't have the budget to just go out and buy equipment. So we needed to buy as an investment with the hope that we could get enough people to sign up to help us pay for that.
So Mike, why did you elect to do those as pre-recorded rather than having live instruction for your studio classes?
Yeah, no, that's a great question. In all honesty, it was a crapshoot. It was like what people were comfortable with. we did that at first, and then I think the majority of the staff were like, we don't like that.
Sorry, I meant live virtual instruction. I know that
Yeah.
that sounds really crazy, but you know, that the teacher is live and the students are live, but it's being delivered via the internet.
Yeah,
Zoom,
yeah. No,
whatever.
I know what you meant. Yeah, so we opted with the pre-recorded only because we thought that that would be better. We thought that we could have more control. Then found out it was very difficult to do pre-recorded. So this fall we have shifted to live. We have seen enrollment drop though in comparison to the summer. So now we're just doing Zoom classes. I would suspect that part of the reason that has happened is there is also Zoom fatigue at this point. I think that we're probably all experiencing as well. And where we've seen the biggest drop is actually in the youth classes. So we have more young people sign up for classes in the summer than we have this fall. And I'm sure some of it is like parents are like, my kids are on the computer all day long now. Why do I want to put them, you know, on the computer on the weekends? My hope is that in January, when our winter session starts back up, we're going to be able to offer some youth classes on site. I mean, but this is where I'm sort of like, it's like you just have all this cooked pasta and you're just throwing it against the wall, seeing what sticks. And I hate to have to change so much from semester to semester, but I kind of feel like that's where we are because, you know, we don't really know what works right now.
And I believe Persephone would like you to share the numbers you just said again. I think for the income, right? The revenue, that right, Persephone? Were those the numbers you wanted? I think you're frozen, but maybe that again.
Yeah. So for enrollment numbers for art classes, specific to art classes, we have grossed so far around $7,000, $8,000 for the since June, basically. So 4 months. That would be in comparison to 100,000, which would be our normal like sort of summer experience. I would say similarly, museum attendance. You know, weekends are getting better, meaning we're getting close to like 600 people on the weekends, like on a Saturday or Sunday. Weekdays, we've had a lot of less than 100 people coming through the door. And I should say our average annual visitation is 400,000 plus visits a year. So this is like normally for, you know, again, everything is dependent, but like for a July and August, it would be 45,000 people we would see through the doors in a July or August. We had 3,000 plus for each of those months. So again, I'm sure very similarly to what you all are experiencing as well, people are just not interested in visiting museums. And I think in addition to that, it's, you know, in looking at the numbers, it's probably like 90% non-members are visiting the museum right now. And again, I don't know that that's entirely surprising given the likely age of our membership, right? Probably skew a little bit older. I don't have the exact numbers on that. And so that might be more of a reason of like, why would I want to go out right now, right, to the museum?
Mike, I was intrigued by your question about, or your comment sort of about, instead of adapting programs to just offer new ones. And I'd love to hear your reflections on that, like how you came to that and sort of what you might have done instead, or what you might do.
That's a great question. And, you know, we haven't totally resolved that. I think what it was, Leslie, is, you know, it was sort of like, all right, everybody, we can't do things the way that we did them before. So like, let's, you know, if you want to buy whatever equipment you need to. If you want to do it this way, and I noticed a lot of deer in headlights, right? I think people were like, yes, I want to offer virtual art classes, but I don't know how to do it, right? I want to offer virtual tours. I don't know how to do it. Same with music, right? And so it did not dawn on me until we were probably into August, September, where I realized that, you know, I think part of it is everybody wanted to do something new or adapt with a new, but nobody really knew how to do it. And it would have been ideal, of course, for everybody, right? Had we had the ability to actually stop and sort of look up and be like, okay, so we've got time to thoughtfully plan this out. But I'm sure, like many of us, and granted, we were closed for 3 months, but it was something about like once we reopened, it was like, oh my God, how do we do this, right? How do we do it? And everybody since that point has just like been scrambling, and like that everybody, we're working on a day-to-day right now, right? Versus like, how do I look out? Like I can barely even think about January, let alone the end of the fiscal year, let alone like we're beginning a strategic plan, and I'm supposed to be thinking about like 5 years from now. It's so tough. So part of me, you know, my reflection on that is it would be great if we could have just said, we know what we can do during normal times. Why don't you give us some time to actually step back and think about what we can do now, right? And we just haven't really had that opportunity to do so. And I'm thinking we'll get there eventually. I just don't know when.
Thank you.
Yeah. Has anybody had similar thoughts around that as far as your current programming, what you wish you could be doing?
I think Mike tried to, I think looking at our lineup, most of our programs are actually newly developed, and we were able to do that pretty quickly. We started a program because with the shutdown, that came really quick on the heels of the annual Slow Art Day in April. And so we tried to offer our Slow Art Day that we would have done in the galleries online. And it worked really, really well. So ever since then, we've been doing Slow Art Fridays every week, and those are docent led. So that's a completely new program for us that we hadn't done before. And this was actually the last year that we were going to try Slow Art Day, because we tried it for, I think, 4 years and no one ever showed up. And then this year all of our conversational programs, we cap at 30 registrations so that we can have conversation without chaos and, you know, allow people to unmute themselves and interact. It was full with like a 45 or 50 person wait list. And so it was really, really nice for us. We also started weekly member programs that are more lecture-y, and we don't really do lectures at our museum. Our audience in general doesn't tend to respond well to lectures. In Asheville, people like to be very engaged and part of their learning process. And so lectures don't tend to go well. We have more panel discussions or more interactive artist or speaker-led programs. But with the member programs, people tended to really want that more lecture-y format. But we started a new Third Thursday program that we will sort of transition to an in-person experience once we feel comfortable with having indoor group programs. But other programs that we are offering were sort of adapted from what we did before, like you were saying. So our program for adults with memory loss and their care partners, we moved to Zoom. Our book discussion, we moved to Zoom. And then our adult studio program, we also moved to Zoom. The adult studio program has been really interesting because some of the programs that we've offered naturally lend themselves to not being in a room together, like digital photography, because if you were doing your critiques, you'd be sitting in a dark room together looking at a screen anyway. So that has been working really well, and every digital photography class that we've offered has filled up. But other ones like drawing classes, painting classes, journaling classes, they've been hit or miss. So some of those, I think people really do want that in-person instruction and to be able to have the instructor there to demonstrate and be able to sort of get a feel for the materials and media rather than trying to suss it out through a screen.
Yeah, that's interesting. We have found a very similar, or a very not similar. We have found an opposite sort of impact with classes. Our adult drawing and painting are going gangbusters right now, virtually. I'm only equating it to people are stuck at home. They want to pick up a hobby or something, right? And so it's like drawing and painting seems like one of those things that you can do while you're at home. Yeah, that's interesting.
We normally offer our yoga program as well indoors inside the museum. We tried to do it outdoors, and the first couple of classes went really great, and then it sort of started to fall off. So I think that sometimes when we have had small group in-person classes, people come maybe once to try it out because, like you said, they want to get out of the house and, engage with the museum because that's a thing that they were used to doing. But once they've done it once or twice, it's not necessarily something that we saw people wanting to repeat.
I can speak to youth and family programs at Milwaukee Art Museum. For the most part, we've tried to adapt existing programs. We had a drop-in open studio that was open daily. We've moved to offering videos of art activities every other week. And then we're also kind of program by program updating our website landing pages to house those videos. So Studio at Home, now it's ready. I think we have one for Playdate with Art, which was our drop-in preschool program, which our educator has turned that into a 30-minute TV show, basically, on Facebook. So she's very brave. I used to lead a story time once a week. Now I'm doing a video story once a month. Again, we're kind of updating that website landing page to house those videos. And we've also moved events online. Actually, and I'll put it in the chat. Just this past weekend, we had our annual Day of the Dead event. In this case, we had, instead of us presenting the art activities, we had local artists present activities. Our performance was a single song performed at the museum, capturing video on each performer 1 by 1 or 2 by 2 and collaging it together. And then our baker that usually makes goods for our giant ofrenda, we went to the bakery and did a short video. So I'll put that in the chat to share.
Emily, do you have a sense of how, like, are people making it through these videos? And I ask because, we've been putting videos up of concerts, and I saw the most recent one was like, we had 1,600 people view it for an average of like 17 seconds, right?
That's a great question. So Day of the Dead just went up Sunday. So we're still working through like analyzing what happened on the website. But we chose 3 videos to put on Facebook and boosted them. And we're counting engagement. If you make it through 10 seconds of the video, then you have engaged. And also we found like one song is enough, like 3 minutes of performance feels full. And then with classes for fall, we updated our youth studio class, calling it Art Club. And we actually oversold both age groups of classes. We haven't filled classes for 10 years, but somehow there is an appeal. Just maybe making it feel a little more casual. And also, instead of longer term projects, each week is a different prompt. So if you miss one, there's kind of no stress. We are, still investigating in the collection, still making art together, but the teachers are also just trying to make sure the kids feel like they're making friends. And if you want to read a Halloween poem, we'll make time for that. It's okay. So I'll put a link to our event in the chat in case anyone would like to check it out. Oh, also we had an artist make a handout that you can print from the website, and that's been really popular. We also put those in art kits and distributed them to a few different places.
We have in the chat, there's a great comment from Darlene asking about or proposing this educator membership, which I think is a great idea, and kind of throwing it out there to ask everyone what they think about pricing for such a thing. And I don't know if anyone has anything to offer there or.
We're looking at that also. I loved her analogy of a nail into Jello. As far as schools and teachers, we're trying to be flexible. We're usually really robust with our tour season right about now. So not being able to see students and teachers at all has really decimated our education program. So we're trying to figure out how to support teachers, where they're at with their professional development needs, and struggling with how to stay open but have a plan. So we're thinking about doing a teacher meetup, trying to help them connect to each other and charge $5 for a happy hour experience. We haven't done that before. We've done teacher workshops, but this would be a little bit new for us and potential revenue. But that's as far as we've gotten.
And Abby, I'm curious, in lieu of field trips, are you guys able to offer anything to schools right now?
Yeah, so we've been putting together art kits, also like Emily, and we're focusing on Title I schools for now where there's more need for these supplies. So we're putting together art kits, and we began our fall season making tours and then quickly realized we were putting too much into our videos. 15 minutes is crazy. We need to scale back and try to anticipate what that audience's needs are going to be when they return to the classroom. So we are kind of bumbling through video editing and buying some equipment to make it look good and just responding to teachers' needs. If they want 5 minutes on, the passage of time, we will give you that. So it's really, it can't be one size fits all the way it used to be as much. But yeah, so that's our way of adapting so far.
And does anyone have experience of limiting access to certain video content or other content like on their website? And what kind of tools you're using for that so that people can't share it out widely? Is anyone doing that?
I put together a retail kit so we could sell some art supplies. And we did a link to a Vimeo demo. So you have to have bought the art kit to have the link to the demo. So there is kind of a paywall there. I don't know how you would find it if you didn't have that. So that's how we've been able to limit access.
I'm curious, I want to see if I understood properly, Abby. So with the work that you're doing, creating videos for teachers to use, have you gotten clear feedback from them that 15 minutes is plenty or too much? Or you're just, I'm curious how you're, and that you're thinking about 5-minute increments, which I can understand makes sense, but I'm just curious what the feedback has been that's helped shape the length of those.
Yeah, in Texas, our art teachers only have their students for 30 minutes a week right now.
Got it.
So we've kind of lost our connection to the classroom teachers for the time being. We're really focusing on art teachers. And so they said that they could work more flexibly with a 5-minute, 3 to 5 really minute snippet that they could put onto the student portal and let students watch at their own, on their own time. So based on direct feedback.
Interesting. All right, thank you. That's helpful.
We reached out in Toledo. We reached out to some instructional designers at the University of Toledo and just got some tips on advice for what they would recommend, right? So like, and again, it seems sort of intuitive now, but at the time, right, you don't know what you're doing. But it was like, video quality is important, but audio quality is more important, right? Like they have to be able to hear you, otherwise they're going to get frustrated and turn the video off. Keep it short like that. They were like 10 to 15-minute videos. That's about the attention span before you want to insert a break of some kind. Of course, having said that, then some of our videos ended up being like 45 minutes long because, you know, we have people who are like, this content is so important. There's no way I can scale it back. So yeah, so that was helpful. And, you know, also just like, similarly, I was like, you know, what platform should we use? What do you recommend? So I found that really helpful. And in fact, I think I have convinced our director that we need to hire an instructional designer, that if we're going to continue to create digital offerings, videos or not, we need somebody on staff who has some expertise in these sort of like basic components of how you learn online and the scaffolding of learning experiences. So I think I'm there. With the job's not posted yet, but I am cautiously optimistic that we'll have it soon.
I can offer in our previous conversation, Michelle Harrell from the North Carolina Art Museum, I believe, said they were doing Teacher Tuesdays, where they were limiting the regular admission so as to give the teachers their space, and the museum can kind of be empty-ish for their group, kind of going along that happy hour idea. I don't know what time they were doing it or the details, but I know she mentioned that.
I'm curious, something we haven't talked about are, so when we reopened, we changed our hours, right? We dropped our evening hours. We opened up earlier on Sundays than we normally had. That's, of course, impacted programming too, right? Because a lot of our public programs would happen on Thursday nights or Friday nights. I'm curious if your all's institutions have adjusted hours or if they plan to. So now that we've gone through enough of this, we're actually now going to be adding evening hours back, but on different days. And we're closing on Tuesdays, which normally we're just closed on Mondays, but we're going to close Mondays and Tuesdays.
Yeah, I can offer that we've limited our open hours like a lot. We're only open Wednesday through Sunday, 12 to 5 p.m., which is not a lot of people can make it there during that time. So I do think that once, you know, in the next couple of weeks, we're going to have to reassess that because our attendance numbers are not great.
Is anybody having good attendance right now?
So I think we're at like 35 to 40% of where we would have been last year. So, so it's not, I mean, you know, the capacity that we could accommodate, we're not reaching capacity at all. I mean, you know, so annually we have 500,000 visitors. So right now on a daily or weekly average, we're getting about 35 to 40% of what we would have gotten that day a year ago. So it's reasonable in a way, but it's still, the galleries feel pretty darn empty. So, and we haven't done any kind of on-site programming at all. You know, so we've started doing some virtual, and we're ramping up to do a lot more virtual programming. And we reopened the same hours, but as we start doing virtual programming, whenever we do it live, we're not necessarily going to do it at the hours we used to do it, because you know, we're going to offer things during the day. Like often we do Friday night lectures or programs, gallery talks, and we're going to offer them during the daytime live. And then once they're recorded, they'll be on the website on demand and people can watch them anytime. But so we're not sort of sticking to our evening time slots the way we used to. So far, we'll see. That's the plan. And then we'll see what happens.
I know, I think for our virtual stuff, at first we tried to avoid museum hours, but then once we saw how low attendance was, we realized we could be in the galleries even when the museum was open. It wasn't really disrupting a whole lot. So it looks like we have, so I did see, Darlene, I don't know if you were responding to my attendance being well or not, but you said yes. I'm curious if you could, if that was the case, if you could tell us what museum you're with. Increased attendance, that's interesting. Where are you?
And we also have a question for Leslie, which museum you are at as well.
Oh, my apologies, the St. Louis Art Museum.
We really haven't talked docents at all. I don't know if anybody's interested in talking docents. I bring them up only because, you know, I heard very early on they wanted to be engaged, right? They wanted to be giving tours. They wanted to be getting their regular enrichments. And at first I was like, I just can't. I should say we lost our docent program manager back in December, and we're getting ready to hire somebody in March. And then everything stopped. So like we don't even have anybody managing the docents right now other than me, which I think they all regret that right now. No, but I, you know, this is where they sort of play that dual thread as being your workforce, but also being that audience constituency. And we certainly haven't done anything to fully satisfy their engagement. I'm curious if any of you all have either faced similar challenges or if you've successfully been able to engage your volunteer corps.
I can speak to that. We kept all of our docent training dates on the calendar for the spring, have a full fall. We switched to Zoom training within a day or two. They were very grateful for that. And for us, we were right in the middle of training a new class of 30 docents. So that is a lot of capacity for our museum. We had been closed for about 3 years for a major expansion and renovation project and desperately needed more docents for our core. So to sort of shut down their training was unimaginable to me because we needed them so much. So we kept training them. Switching to Zoom training really worked well. We had to reconfigure some of the topics that we were doing and how we were having them do their practice talks and things like that to transition to be touring docents. But as I mentioned, the docents very quickly started offering that weekly program called Slow Art Friday. We also engaged our docents to help us as sort of consultants and to try things with new program models that we were offering. So we put them to work on committees, and as you mentioned, Mike, they also have been really great as audience members for some of our programs as well. So it was really important to me that we not let them fall by the wayside because they're really important in our education community here at the museum.
Any challenges pivoting them to Zoom as far as like their own comfort level with technology or anything of that nature?
Not really, because we always had recorded their trainings as well. So if they couldn't attend in person, then we would post their video of the trainings that they missed on the docent website for them to access. So actually Zoom makes that easier because I don't have to go and set up a camera and, you know, do a whole lot of editing like I used to have to do. So no, I think that Zoom as a platform has generally been pretty user friendly, and so we haven't really had any problems, and if anything, saw increased attendance from docents being present at training.
And how many docents do you have? We have a question.
We had about 30 docents when we reopened, and so this new class effectively doubled the number of docents that we had. So I think that right now, sort of when all shook out in the wash, we have about 50 to 55 docents in our core.
I can offer another perspective from the Nelson Atkins Museum. When COVID started, we were finishing training a new class of docents, and we continued to do that. And they graduated virtually, and they'll do their qualifying tours when we're back open. But then immediately, kind of into summer, a lot of requests for engagement. Which in many cases was, I think a desire to be entertained, which we needed to kind of set some boundaries around, particularly since summer is not the time when we typically have docent trainings or any kind of engagement, and they were wanting something pretty regularly. Now we've set our training schedule for the year. It's fewer training sessions and much more focused on things that feel particularly necessary at this time. So we're getting ready to do a training on working with students who are experiencing trauma. We're doing more DEI training. And then with regard to Zoom, they really adapted to trainings on Zoom, meetings on Zoom. We're doing tours and studio workshops through Zoom with schools now as well. And we've had a lot of success with those. We're sold out through December on both our tours and our workshops. We had about 70 of 110 docents sign up for the training, but are not getting the same number signing up to actually do the tours. So they're eager, but there's still a lot of fear of kind of going it alone. So we are having an educator in the tours with the docents for the first month or so that they kind of, something goes wonky with the technology, they feel that there's somebody there. But it's also kind of getting them to understand that things are going to go wonky. We can't anticipate what the classroom setup will be, whether sometimes we don't even know if the kids are on their own computers or, if the video is being projected.
So I have a question about the schools. Are Kansas City schools back in, like, are kids back in the building? Because I'm just curious, since your field trip options seem to be so popular, or field trip options, right?
Yeah, a lot of them are back. Some continue to still be virtual. I'm not sure what percentage though.
Yeah, interesting. Yeah, Toledo Public is still completely virtual.
Yeah,
Right.
and then what happens, we're really spiking right now in cases, so we'll see what happens in the coming weeks and months.
Yeah, I think everybody's probably wondering that, right?
Yeah, I see Kylie's question. We do not charge for the virtual tours. The virtual workshops that we're doing, we never charge for tours, so we kind of carried that policy into the virtual realm. Our studio workshops, we typically charge $7 for. Right now, because we're not supplying the materials, we're asking teachers to identify, they can choose a lesson and then choose one kind of packet of 3 materials that they typically would have in the classroom, like watercolors or clay, or I can't remember what the third one is. And so we're not charging for those as well at this point, but certainly looking for opportunities for revenue moving forward.
I could talk a little bit about the St. Louis Art Museum to speak to Mike, what you were saying about docents as staff versus audience. So our docents are not allowed back in the building as staff right now, because there's literally no place for them to perch. I mean, like, so every available meeting room, break room, the docent room is now an office for somebody to spread the staff out enough. So those volunteers aren't allowed to come back as volunteers, and they've been told that won't be possible through the end of this calendar year. I suspect that's going to extend for a lot longer. They can come to the museum as members of the public, and I think some of them are, but maybe not huge numbers. And then we have been doing virtual training, using Zoom, and there's been really enthusiastic attendance at that. And we're presenting on things relating to the collection, relating to shows that are going to open, even though they won't actually be touring for quite a while in person. But as we develop more virtual programming, we're hoping to incorporate them into the virtual programming a little bit more. But I think that's going to be very gradual, because for most of the education staff, we're still getting up and running on doing the virtual programming ourselves. So before we're ready to really help the docents participate in that, it's going to be a while. So.
Yeah, we have similar, our docents also have a docent room, but that's all in the education space, and that is entirely closed off to the public right now. To your point, Leslie, like staff are now working out of classrooms, right? The main area is now the staff lunch area, so they can spread it out throughout that entire space. So we're hoping January we're able to reopen that, but we'll see.
Well, I think we're right at time. It's almost the end of the hour. So thank everyone. Thank you, Mike, for all of your contributions. And the next month is going to be on trauma-aware teaching. So look forward to that, and we'll see you next time.
Yeah,
Thank you so
thanks
much.
everyone for the
Thank you.
conversation. Yeah.